So hi, would you say your first names?
I'm Jane.
I'm Dan.
How'd you hear about the healing journey?
Father Mike. I had talked to him about some PTSD issues that I was having, and we had breakfast with him, and he mentioned this. That's how we found out about it, signed up, and used it as our honeymoon.
What's that been like?
It's nothing that I thought it was going to be. Absolutely nothing.
Let's say a couple more words about that.
Well,
This was all about me. When we first
Correct.
came, it was healing, final healing for myself, for issues that I couldn't identify with PTSD. I mean, I didn't know how to attack them because I didn't know I was suffering from them because I would be asleep. So I was hoping I would have healing for me. And she came along as a civilian, just
Witness.
a witness. We figured,
Support.
and I took it as non-participant, just sort of being there, which was completely different from all of the civilians that participated in this.
So Dan, would you tell us a little bit about what branch service you served in and your time of service in your area of operation? That's
I was a draftee, U.S. Army, infantry, Vietnam. 1969, December 15th, 1968, December 15th, 1969, Central Highlands. I was demolition, tunnel rat, squad leader, point tracker. Came home in December. 3 days after leaving Vietnam, I'm back on the street. 6 months later, back in junior college, and then eventually worked my way through undergraduate and 2 graduate schools, and then work. Suffered all the classic PTSD descriptions before the word was around, and at the end, when I retired, would have said that I'm over. I don't have that anymore. Was told by an old vet when I went down to Sawtell, not true, and it turns out he was right. Not the nightmares, but some underlying deep disassociations that I didn't identify with that affected relationships, getting close to people, and couldn't understand why. That was my purpose of coming here.
You mentioned sleep in particular, Dan. What was going on in your sleep?
I have no idea. I was told that I would pound the bed, say no, 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 no.
Yelling.
Yelling. Have no recollection of any of that. I would have told you I had a good night's sleep, maybe a little tired in the morning.
What's it like for you? What was it like for you these nights?
It's like being in a war zone. First of all, I had no idea that there was this problem, because his comment about Vietnam was, "Oh, I put that in my back pocket, and I'm done with that." So the first night we tried to spend the night together. It is a war zone. He is flailing and yelling and turning and tossing and sitting up. His eyes are open, but he is not awake. He is not awake. And he is just suffering. He is trembling and shaking and angry, and it's just an endless vacillation of what's going on. And I just moved away and just watched, because you couldn't really touch him. You can't do that. At least that was my instinct. It was not to touch at all.
So it must have been pretty disruptive for you.
Yes, there was no sleep.
Well, that's pretty disruptive. I'd like to circle back then to what your experience was. You said a little bit about what it was like, how you came here. But then things changed for you, Jay?
things changed tremendously.
Would you be willing to say just a bit about that?
About my experience here?
How things changed? You came here thinking you were going to be a witness
Correct.
for Dan.
A silent witness, a support person for all the vets that were here.
Right. So if you'd be willing to say a little bit about how things changed, we'd like to hear.
Everyone in life has their baggage that they take with them, and I thought that I had taken care of my issues, my life experiences, back in the late 80s and 90s. I thought, well, I've worked through that. I've seen a therapist, and I've done really well with this, and it's gone. It's finished. It's history. And it was, this was a catharsis for me that I never ever experienced. Not only that, except for my psychiatrist, except for my beloved who went through this with me, and one other person prior to Daniel has no idea that any of this happened to me. I never shared any of this.
So there's something about this setting that allowed not only the Dan's and the other veterans' stories to emerge, but you're pointing to the fact that civilians were able to bring in their stories, right?
It was beyond, you can't separate the civilians and veterans, because we heard stories from veterans that had nothing to do with Vietnam. It had to do with baggage that PTSD that we experienced here a lot had nothing to do with Vietnam. It had to do with damage that we had had throughout our lives that we carried with us. And it went way beyond personal healing. We talk about communal. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about her. Everybody involved. I mean, people we hadn't known 2 days before. I mean, literally, would walk down the street, wouldn't have known them, their names or anything. And we're telling stuff that...
Very personal things and
huge.
feeling safe.
And it's not just us. Everybody. And some of the things were issues that people didn't recognize they have until they sat in the group and it came up. It was even after doing this, the Knights are still getting over this. There's still healing to be done. But it was some really heavy lifting that we didn't expect.
So one of the things that we strive for, that we say we strive for, is to heal the separation, the split between the military experience and the civilian experience. How did you feel that went? Dan, as a veteran, do you feel like anything changed there?
The vets we talked about some of the experiences we had there, but it carried over. We went beyond early childhood. A lot of us talked about early childhood and things we experienced. It went way beyond Vietnam. I think Vietnam was part of our experience that maybe other things that were before us contributed to, and things after. So I don't think Vietnam by itself, it was a collaboration and probably a building up of those things. And this gave us a venue, an area to expose that. We didn't look for it, but it exposed all of that and allowed us the trust. It's amazing to be able to voice that in front of people. And when you voiced it, there was one story I told that I know in my mind that I've told it before, but having to actually say it and think about it, I got very, very emotional afterwards that I did not expect.
So just to focus in on that a little further, do you feel like you were heard and understood, at least as far as we were able, that the civilians were able to hear and understand your story?
I think they understand I heard. And we talked in small groups afterwards, so we talked about that. And I'm going to say yes. I mean, the things that we talked about. And for me, the bottom line was, the litmus test was, for the last 2 nights anyway, I don't have that anxiety. I have slept. I use a CPAP machine normally. I didn't use it the last 2 nights. I didn't need it.
Let's hear from Jane about that.
Well, he's been much better. He has been. The one who's had to process it a lot, who had a lot of epiphanies, is me. I was the one that had 2 nights that were very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really interesting as a civilian, when you think about the horror of war, there really is no way you can ever understand or even empathize with someone who has gone through that situation, but you can empathize, and you, I think, can relate to what has to happen to heal, regardless of where you incurred your hurt.
So as a civilian, what do you feel you were able to offer the vets?
Non-judgmental, no judgment, no labeling, no need for me to project myself into your story. I can listen to it, I can honor it, and I can let it go as a civilian. I think that's the gift that we were able to convey. Of just recognizing, and it becomes so clear as a person who has not experienced war, that is the only gift you can offer.
Any last words? Any last words to share with the folks who are going to be seeing this?
There are vets here, and civilians, I believe, that this is not the first time they've come back. I mean, we've talked about it. I think we'll be coming back. It was, it sounds, I know people looked at it and said, you're going where on your honeymoon? But we've talked about this. This was a heck of a way to start a marriage. I mean, Jane's 66, I'm 70. We're late in our lives, so yes, but we're stronger people today than we were 4 days ago.
Yeah.
Our relationship is stronger than it was 4 days ago.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.